Okay. So, welcome back everyone to the Metaguild Hangouts. It's Johan, and here with me is my co-host and friend Foligina. Thank you for being here, Foligina.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Johan, for having me, as always.
So, today's topic is World Eternal Online, and we are gathered here today to honor Althea's greatest champions, Kurloop's founder Vincenzo Alagna, lead game designer Dan Chao, and marketing lead Zan. Thank you for being here, and I hope I didn't butcher your names.
No, you did great. You did great, and thank you for having us here, guys. This is super cool. Thank you.
We're very honored to be able to feature this exclusive AMA/Hangout where we get to hear valuable insights for newcomers and longtime supporters alike. So, chat, make sure to ask questions. We'll pull them up when we can. I can see that Igor loves your trailer. He says the trailer is amazing. So, we'll be starting off by introducing Metaguild. So in short, we are a community comprised of blockchain enthusiasts, gamers, and developers. Our aim is to advance the play-to-earn landscape at large and have a profound impact and footprint in the metaverse. Our primary mission is to empower our players and protect their interests everywhere in the metaverse. And World Eternal Online has already been in production for more than 1 year. And another thing we were sold on this project is that World Eternal Online's team not only focuses on delivering a great gaming experience, but they share our ethos of decentralization and freedom for players. So I think we should just break the ice and get things started. So it would be great if you could give us a brief introduction about yourselves, your backgrounds, and tell us a bit about Kurloop's mission, its vision, and maybe your story. I mean, essentially, from where was the inspiration for making World Eternal Online, and what is your background in MMORPGs? Which are your favorite MMORPGs?
Right. So I'm Vincenzo Alagna, and I'm the co-founder of Kurloop Games. I've been working in the game industry for around 20 years. Between my first thing I was actually on Game Boy Color. That's when I started coding a long time ago, and then evolved all the way through. I've seen all the evolution through free to play, and then eventually, where we are today, which is like a cross-platform product between PC and mobile. And where we started. Well, I mean, it's actually almost 2 years now since Dan and I decided to start to work on this, and it was first just the two of us, and how the team grew consistently. But I just I'll let the other guys speak on this one. But yeah, that is me.
Yeah, I'm Dan. I've been working in the game industry a similar amount of time, maybe around 20 years. Started out as an engineer working on console and PC games, and then eventually moved over to Facebook and mobile games. And then eventually started doing this with Vincenzo. But yeah, I think with World Eternal Online, the initial inspiration was, I mean, God, there's so many, but the first thought was I play a lot of MOBAs. I think I've dumped maybe 4,000 hours into Dota or more, and the first thought was could we make an MMO that was just like a larger, more persistent world of like a MOBA. So controlling heroes that are very similar to MOBA style heroes where they have 4 skills, and so similar to games like League of Legends or Dota. And then I think the second big inspiration was around, there's a kind of this unsatisfactory feeling with MMOs that a lot of MMOs felt like they were very much on rails, right? Where you're in an area and you have to go kill 10 boars or 15 tigers or whatever that is, and you kind of move on to the next area. And there was also this kind of set of MMOs I thought were a little bit more inspiring, like EVE Online and Albi Online, which had a very vibrant, crafting economy. So I thought those were things that we also really, really loved and wanted to bring in, where the world is kind of this ever-changing dynamic thing where people are fighting over an area. You're not just doing quests there, right? Like you're actively fighting other guilds, taking control of that territory, gaining some resource advantage over them, and then using that to craft all your new gear and potions and stuff like that. So that, I think, was probably the initial inspiration there.
I see. Oh, Zan,
Hi,
go ahead.
I'm Zan. I'm the marketing lead. I've been doing marketing for the past 12 years. I did some game advertising for 2 or 3 years, advertising a lot of MMORPGs, browser-based games, mobile games. I advertised games like Perfect World or World of Tanks, things like that. So that's my experience there.
Thank you. So, having a lot of experience in MMOs, I wanted to ask about your thoughts about the resurgence of MMOs. I mean, like, there hasn't been only World Eternal Online. There are other games. There is, like, recently New Worlds, then Final Fantasy, Ashes of Creation, and Lost Ark, RuneScape, OSRS, World of Warcraft. So it seems like we're really starting to see a resurgence of MMOs in general. Even in Web3, we've seen games like Aavegotchi, Big Time, or Ember Sword, for example. So do you think there's going to be a situation where a rising tide floats all ships and all the games just kind of grow and become better because of the competition against each other? Or do you think there's going to be a resurgence of MMOs in general? Because for the past, I mean, really for the majority of the decade, it seems like MMOs haven't really been as popular as they used to be in the mid 2000s.
Yeah, I hope that there's a resurgence of MMOs personally. I think that, just being able to exist in a persistent world with other players and a lot of other players that kind of share their own economy, and they're all crafting stuff together. I really fondly remember, my first time playing WoW and a bunch of other MMOs, and just how like impactful that was. I think that maybe the reason that MMOs kind of weren't as popular for a while is because as people's time got a lot more fractured and splintered, and people got a little bit busier, it was harder to commit to a longer period of time to a longer slot of time to play an MMO, where you may not have been able to get anything done if you didn't log on for at least half an hour, right? And that was another thing that we kind of wanted to address, is like we did want to have a mobile client where you can log in and kill some low level monsters and grind and farm resources at 5 minutes at a time while you're playing, or while you're at work or in school or whatever that is. So being able to play in like shorter time slices, but then still come home and play on your PC and do an hour-long raid or 2-hour-long raid. That was kind of one of the things that we looked at too. But yeah, I'm glad that MMOs are coming back.
And I think there is also an additional factor there. I mean, you may argue like Facebook or everybody else, they are trying to build essentially a version of a glorified MMO, right? It's the need for a more additional presence online, and the web has been interesting, and it's like a 2D experience, and the amount of interaction has been like reading a newspaper, but definitely like there is interest from a lot of companies that you've seen in creating events and spaces, and the technology that has been behind MMOs is so relevant for creating like a new version of web interaction. And so you have the two extremes where you have very, very short span of attention on something, where you're just scrolling maybe on Instagram and something like that, and just clicking a few things there. But the quality of the interaction is very transactional with the content, right? You see it very quickly, you move on. Whereas when you are deciding consciously that you're jumping into simulation and decided that the rules of the simulation, the world, the lore, the friends that you have there, are important for you, you're spending more time there, that is a more powerful, you have a lot of attention from people while you're playing, and that is a very powerful transition for how we interact online. And so I think that there is just not, in this time, just not only the game side, but there's also a lot of other companies in the media space that are interested in that kind of presence and the kind of interaction. Like with 3D characters, it just opens a different level from both interactions and relationships with people.
I totally agree. I think this is a very powerful point, and yeah, I also say that I like to believe that the future social networks will be basically video games, as when the technology will allow us to do so.
Yeah, I mean, you can joke that Facebook posts are your daily quest, and people get excited by the amount of likes they get. You know what I mean? And so we are all competing in that thing, and and there is also branding and a lot of other things that you're going to see, like having like brands. Like you've seen a lot of cooperations happening recently. It was what was Burberry's that did something with Arena Valor, a bunch of other products where just have branded content in a game. And this will keep happening, right? So yeah, I think we're all on the same page there.
I totally agree, and I think it was a transition that was bound to happen anyway. But the recent 2 years with COVID pushed it, are going to make it happen even faster, because as you were saying, many brands were pushed to have even some of the events that they were usually holding, like IRL, they had to make very basic, like 3D spaces to kind of try to show their products anyway. And I think they understood that it's something that will work. And yeah.
Yeah, it is definitely early, but the data will show us like in the next, like it is already strong now, and it will, in a couple of years when we look back, like the data will probably give strong indicators. Sorry, go ahead.
I mean, even the demand for PC hardware, like because of COVID, like it's skyrocketed, and we're seeing GPU prices like go up like crazy. I mean, like currently, people have never been as connected, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, I agree like 100% there. And again, like guys, like this is the super cool thing. Like all the game developers, all the people that came from that experience of building something which is connected and real time, they are all contributing, like to some extent to this. So yeah, this is a very interesting time to be in. So, and I guess everybody told us this before us 20 years ago and 30 years ago and so on. But for people who actually come from the game industry and are trying to build games, this is a very interesting phenomenon for us to watch.
An interesting question from Igor in chat. So he's asking, have you started developing World Eternal Online with Web3 economy integration in mind? And why have you decided to use blockchain, if not?
Development, for sure. The game's been in development. I mean, Vincenzo and I started way back in January of 2020. But then we didn't get funding and fully hiring a team until around September of 2020. So yeah, I think a lot of the development and the design has been around thinking about how the economy is going to work, what things get turned into tokens, and what things don't, right? So that's definitely been a big part of the development.
So when we did the first raise, we did an interview with Dean Takahashi from VentureBeat. And already then, even if we didn't talk about blockchain in general, we were talking about moving control. The main idea was to move more control away from things that generally are implemented in the product through, let's say, NPCs or designer-controlled events, and trying to move as much as possible towards player control. Right. And so that was already in the regional design, meaning like, how do we, instead of having a city controlled by our AI, how do we have that controlled by players? Instead of having the crafters controlled by where you just go there and you just give it, and it's controlled by an NPC, how do we make it just so the players control it? And so that was there since the beginning. Right. And then in all the discussions we were having internally already a couple of years ago, was like, what is the best tool to eventually get to that level of control, distributed in a transparent way and whatnot. And so like then eventually the blockchain part around a year and something ago became like the obvious choice at this point. because the rest of the industry was accepting it. There was a adoption and everything else. So of all the possible tools, we thought that this was already, the best one to add to the stack, and that is influencing the rest of the game design. But the idea of just moving control back and part of the ownership of the product towards players, that was there since the day one.
Yeah, and I think like the key piece, at least in the game, I don't know if we've just been talking around this a little bit and haven't like dived into the meat of it, but is the crafting economy. Like in some MMOs, when you kill a monster, they drop weapons like swords and armor and stuff like that, right? But for us and some other MMOs, when you kill monsters or you're harvesting, resources in the world, they just drop materials and resources, and then you need to bring them to a crafter who is another player to kind of make you whatever items that you actually can then use. So whether that's like a sword, a new piece of armor, a potion that you can drink before a boss battle, all that sort of stuff has to go through this crafting phase, which is done by another player. So there has to be an interaction with that player. And that's where I think blockchain became really powerful for us, because, naturally kind of giving out those licenses to players, whether they're owning a city or they're becoming a blacksmith or an alchemist or a pet breeder, whatever that is. Players need to flow through that and talk to them and interact with them, and some of those people kind of bubble to the top, right? Where it's like, well, if I'm a blacksmith and I've found all the best fire recipes in the world and I've upgraded my blacksmith to have the best fire bonus damage, then people are going to come to me when there's an ice raid boss, and they need to come to me because I'm going to make them the best fire swords there are. So I think blockchain was a real natural fit for that sort of stuff.
And in this example, like you just gave, how do you avoid a monopoly?
Yeah, so that's a good point. That person can kind of hike up their prices if they really are, the best fire blacksmith in the world, right? And people would be forced to pay that. But what's going to end up happening is that person can only make a certain number of items per day. So even if another person comes along and maybe they have, I don't know, maybe their fire damage is maybe half of mine, there's still a market for them, right? Because because I've made all the items I can for that day, and people are going to have to go somewhere else. Maybe that person can't charge quite as much, but that's kind of how we control that. And of course, there will be some control about in terms of like how many recipes we're releasing and how many upgrade materials for blacksmiths and other crafters we're releasing as well. So we can determine the level of scarcity for that if we think that the monopoly is too harsh. But sometimes you want to reward those types of players that have really put in the effort to become at the top of their game.
I see. And another thing is that I haven't read your white paper. It seems like even though this person is the best at crafting, let's say, fire type weapons or equipment,
Mm-hmm.
fire type weapons won't be relevant for the entire duration of I don't know the existence of World Eternal Online. As you play, you unlock more and more zones or regions, which will require a different set of heroes or a different set of elemental damage, if I understood correctly.
Yeah, I think part of I think some of my gripes with MMOs out there is just that there's not enough live content and events being created, right? Like there's only so many DLCs that come out for World of Warcraft, let's say, right? And there could be more rotation of events happening. So maybe that ice monster comes out on Tuesday and he's only there to be killed. He respawns 10 times, and then on Wednesday it's something else. And maybe that fire monster comes back 20 days later, or that ice monster comes back 20 days later. But I think it's important to have a much more live world where, people are fighting over the same territory. Those monsters and bosses are spawning, dungeons are opening up and closing, new zones are opening up and closing as well. So just to have that be a much more vibrant like kind of dynamic experience. And then, have players be in charge of unlocking that stuff, right? So maybe the next boss doesn't spawn until this ice monster is killed 10 times. And maybe when you kill him, he falls over some mountain, that mountain crumbles and opens up a new pathway into a different area. So kind of having that type of really, really dynamic world, I think, is important to us. And just having more going on, I always point to this example in World of Warcraft where we opened the gates of Encourage or AQ, and that was like, I don't know if you guys played that, played WoW during that time, but it was like such a momentous time where the whole server had to participate and open up this gate to this new dungeon in this kind of sandy area in the south. And I don't know, I felt like that sort of cooperation with hundreds of other players was so impactful, and I felt like we really accomplished something, as stupid as that sounds, that day. Like, it felt so good. It was like a month or two worth of work, and that's the type of experience we kind of want to give players as well. It's like they work together, they kind of accomplish these things, and they feel really, really big, and actually you get to see the results in the world changing.
And actually, this is like very reminiscent, or I don't know, like I don't know if you're familiar with anime, but it sounds a lot like what's Sword Art Online, if you know the anime.
Yeah.
Like it's like a copy paste.
Well, I will say, yeah. I mean, there have been experiments in general, but I think something we learned from doing, like, working on live operations games at Scale was that exactly what Dan said, which is things that are constantly, we are used to get, as Dan mentioned, a DLC, and that's the content, and they use all of this, and the content is set maybe for a year. But we really feel like it should be more, the live events should be more effective. And so there are these two components: live operations, where there is events rotation, and the sandboxy part of the world where things change because the players make actions, right? And so that should have been in the engine since the beginning. In other ways, like, if the players in a specific area really organize, and they can push forward to unlock the content instead of us deciding, oh, this content is unlocked on this third month and this day, right? And so some of these things are going to be active all the time, like a open world dungeon in there. And then if you unlock things, you just kill the right things in the right sequence, or you complete some specific set of other quests, things unlock for everybody. It's visible for everybody instead of a specific small instance. But yeah, I love I love that anime as well. So
yeah. Also, if you look back at the trailer, there's some events that you can kind of spot out. Right now, they're pretty simple, but I think when that blue wyvern dies, you see the bridge come up, right? And now you can kind of walk over to a new area, or in I think the very beginning of the trailer, there's kind of that gate opening, and then the big demon spawns, right? So how did that gate actually open? Did they have to kill a set of monsters to make that happen? Did they have to go into a dungeon and find a key? Whatever that is, there's always like kind of these triggers and a chain of events that can constantly occur.
Very interesting.
I have a very small question about these triggers. Like, are you planning to make them public or secret? Like, for example, you have to do this in order to unlock this other thing. Like, are you going to say to the players in advance that this is the sequence that you have to make, or you're just going to leave them out there as a secret, and maybe, I don't know, nobody does it for, 1 year, and then a guy randomly does that and he discovers a new place?
That's a good question. There's gonna be both, right? So sometimes we'll say something like, okay, these 5 demons have spawned around the world. You guys can kill them, and then something will happen next. And then some stuff, I think, is we'll definitely hide, and then people will just have to uncover it. I mean, I just got finished playing Elden Ring, and there was that wall that you had to hit 50 times in order to open it.
Yeah.
So
I
it's like,
did that.
yeah, I love that sort of stuff, even though that wall didn't really go anywhere. But yeah, I think it'll be cool to hide that stuff in there for people to discover, right? And that's a
Like
big part of it.
The invisible bridges.
Yeah, I totally love it because I mean, as an I don't know, old person in the gaming community, I guess. When I used to play Pokemon as a very young kid, there was a lot of stuff that was like, in theory, public, but
Yeah.
me coming from a not big city, and I mean, we didn't have internet or something like that. Like every time, I don't know, maybe in the summer, I was meeting some kid from, I don't know, the other part of where I live, and basically it was saying me like, oh, you have to do this secret thing to unlock this. I was like, no way. I've played this game for like 1 year and I didn't know this. And it was like possible just because the information was not as available as it is today with the internet. So the idea of still having something secret in a new game, it's very exciting to me.
Yeah, I remember like some of the evolution in Pokemon was totally undocumented, right? Like
Exactly. Like you have to send this to your friend with that specific item, and only then it evolves. Like, it was so cool.
yeah, I love that stuff too. And I agree that the internet has made some of that stuff much more like widely known, or like the information travels very, very fast, right? So I think the more you can kind of do with cooperative stuff, that slows down the discoverability a little bit. I think makes it a little bit nicer too, because you get a group of people. Maybe this boss requires 100 people, and the kind of sequence of events might be a little bit more mysterious, or there could be even branching events too. So even if servers are kind of discovering different things, it may take a while to do kind of like server first, like boss kills. And then if you do things in a certain order, it may do something different, and then servers can kind of discover different things as well. But yeah, that's gonna be really fun for us, I think, to watch all that stuff unfold.
By the way, maybe you now understand why I requested 2 hours.
Oh. But I just had a very small thing, and it's just that I totally agree, and I find what Dan just said very inspiring, because like, I think that one of the most positive things of the internet, it's that basically it removed the need to travel in a very wide way. And with this, I mean that if you want something, you can get it immediately. But
Yeah.
if you are able to introduce in a game something to, like, that cannot be skipped in a way, in a sense that it makes through cooperation, for example, it makes, again, like, time, it makes it act like a sort of space that you necessarily have to travel to reach a new place in the game. I think that this is very powerful, and it makes, again, like, the discovery of new things even better, because probably what Dan was saying before about World of Warcraft, it's that, like, it's true that the moment that you get excited is when your 2 months of work finally come up to, like, the result. But there is also the travel, like, all the 2 months with your friends. Those are a very, like, cool memory too. So I really like the fact that you guys have been through this and want to bring it back, basically, because gaming was maybe moving towards something more, how can I say it, more immediate. But I think that right formula with some of this, how can I say it, beautiful grinding, maybe we can call it like that, would be very cool.
Yeah, I think also that's like a big part of the way we've been strategically, like turning certain things into NFTs. But I think more importantly, certain things are not going to be NFTs, right? So right now, the way I think about, let's just use the blacksmith as an example. Distributing like a limited number of blacksmith licenses is kind of like, taxi medallions in a city, or like we have liquor licenses here in the US where there can only be a certain number of bars in the city, right? So kind of limiting that stuff, but then actually not making the items that they make into NFTs, right? Because, like, what does that even do? If you made the items that they make into NFTs, then ultimately you're going to skip over the blacksmith and just buy them off of a marketplace somewhere. And that's not what we want to do. We want people to keep on grinding and killing monsters and creating materials and bringing them to blacksmith. So like the real power of that NFT is around forcing that interaction between players, between the hero player and the blacksmith player, right? And then like the real value there is like the blacksmith becoming a better blacksmith by learning more recipes and finding more recipes and upgrading their blacksmith more. And not like, if they're making swords and they're just ending up on an NFT marketplace somewhere else, that's not good for anyone, right? It's devaluing the blacksmith NFT that they've purchased, and also it's just allowing people to skip that content, right? So if you got to give them something to grind for, and I think that's really really that I think is what's really powerful.
I completely agree, and like we can see that as well in the fact that heroes aren't immediately NFTs. So you're forced to interact with the world and play the game in order to ascend your hero enough for it to be sellable or to become an NFT.
I mean, I think what it comes down to is like we still want to make a game where people want to play it, right? And I think that's what's really important to us. And then from there, people can kind of decide what they want to do with the NFTs that they purchase. But to me, it's like if you don't have a great game first, then I think you have issues.
Completely agree. So I guess we'll be moving on to the next topic. So as to the standard versus niche MMORPGs. So MMOs do not burst into the market as an everything box, let's say. So I believe that having a clear and concise vision of what your MMO is and what type of players it's meant to draw in, it always seems to be the best bet. And that being said, having a wide scope game be successful isn't completely beyond the pale. Like it's harder to pull off, given how many divergent desires for a game to cater to, and the general perception that an everything box is just another World of Warcraft clone. And some people believe that there isn't much value in staying in your lane, that niche games will always be a one-trick pony that puts a lot of pressure on doing that one thing well without any other things to entice people. And in order to remain relevant, you would have to be the best consistently and at that one exact thing, which doesn't seem like a sustainable model. And if you were to fall out of favor with that singular crowd you are courting, you're done for. And while other people believe that it is simply common sense that a jack of all trades is a master of none. And the more different types of gameplay you try to include in a single title, the more shallow and less enjoyable the whole of it becomes. So I'm wondering which game style will World Eternal Online be focusing on, or under which box does World Eternal Online fall under? And are you trying to pull off a Yoshi P?
Yeah, I would say it does fall into like a more niche style, right? Where I think a sandbox MMO is inherently more niche in the first place, right? The experience is a little bit less directed, but because of that, like everything's a lot more dynamic, right? So what's going on in the world at that time, whether you're in a guild and you're taking over a piece of territory, or everyone else is working towards, unlocking some new gate that opens up a new zone. I think that's inherently like a less directed experience because it's more flexible. Whereas something like World of Warcraft, I don't know if I would call it more of an everything MMO, but it is more casualized, right? Like what you need to do next is always pretty much laid out in front of you, and I think since our world tends to change a little bit more, that is always not as obvious. And so I think, like, in terms of whether or not that can be supported, I think that really comes down to, not to dive into like the development side of things, but it really comes down to like, what's your development budget? Can you support the team that you have, right? So I always look back at Albion Online. I enjoyed that game quite a bit, but they did go through a period where the game probably attracted a certain audience that they could, but then probably could not support the team that they had. And so things had to scale back a little bit. So I think, like, from this may be less exciting for people, but like, to me, it becomes like a development budget issue. Like, can your game, if you're going to be pulling in a niche audience, can it support the team that you have? And you have to be really creative around that.
Yeah, like MMOs sometimes they just require way too many resources. That's
yeah,
that's a fact.
Yeah, that comes down to me is like a low reuse of content, right? Like, if you're in an area for a few days and you leave that area and you never return to it ever again, those are all assets that that just don't really get a whole lot of reuse, right? And like, I worked on a Soul Reaver game and a Tomb Raider game way back in the day, and we'd have level designers making these awesome levels, and a player spends like, what, 5 minutes like running through it, and then like, you never to be seen again. So kind of like the amount of like manpower that you need to like create those assets for continuing content becomes like unrealistic. So you have to start to revisit those areas. And to me, I think like battling over that stuff in creative ways and providing like new resources, giving people reasons to really go back to those areas and content is like really important.
I mean, it does fall back to like the idea of having to fall back on mass appeal. So I mean, my hat goes off to all of you because it seems like an absolute nightmare. The sheer amount of resources, and on top of that, having to distribute it like in the right way. I mean, one of the things we've seen happen with MMOs is that they have to fall on mass appeal, and you find yourself in this weird area where the game is being made for players that hate the game essentially and don't want to play the game.
Yeah, I think that certain MMOs can really. I still think that they can find their niche. Like, I mean, EVE Online has been going on for so long, right? I think it's done really, really well. And I would argue that game is not for everyone. And I think Albion Online has also kind of finally found its stride in terms of like, it appeals to the players it's going to appeal to. It's not reaching beyond that, and they've found like a very sustainable way to do stuff. So I think there definitely is opportunity for those like slightly more niche MMOs.
And by the way, great job, guys. You're really exciting then today. Like I've never seen him talk so much. Like, I'm so excited. My questions are so great. So, this is very, very good to see as well. But one thing that you also have to consider in the big projects is because the effort that they have to do once you have an established brand or established user base, the effort of trying to make another game is so complex. And then there could be some decisions internally which are not perfectly aligned with what the team will want to do. But there are some monetary issues if we're in a larger company, which let's try to avoid making names, but you guys can see where we're going with this. And so they try to augment the features because, you have to bring every month the results that audience is not decreasing, and there is like more time spent. Everybody has his own metrics inside their company are tracking. And sometimes you may question whether, all these additional new features and changes in gameplay would have been better suited for another game altogether, right? And so then you could specialize the game for what the players that came in the first place they wanted. And so you have a strong, core gameplay, and then make another game. It's just sometimes I see this because we have been in the same situation in the past with larger projects, large corporations, where there was, many billions involved. But, sometimes you have to gauge that too. And one of the decisions for us to go back to to making like a startup and taking some of these decisions here is because we had the ability to design a little bit more flexibly and start from scratch with a product and get the right direction there. But yeah, I've seen products that are trying to do that, and I sympathize with all the project managers and the directors in that situation, because sometimes willingly maybe that they can't justify starting another product altogether, but you could see that the feature set that was added to another game would have been better just in another product altogether.
Yeah, like you see these MMORPGs become this giant mass appeal Frankenstein monster. Like it doesn't make any sense. Where like everything is slapped in, and yeah, like none of it makes sense, and it's all watered down. And I mean, yeah, I completely agree.
Can I add like I have a thought on the topic of niche game. And like I started thinking about this when we were Igor was sharing with us very interesting data on the growth of Twitch over the past, I believe, 10 years. And basically, like I think that the whole gaming world experienced something similar to what happened to Twitch. And what happened to Twitch was this. Basically, at the beginning, Twitch had much fewer viewers than like globally than what it has now, but and it also had much fewer streamers. But at the beginning, like the average number of viewers per streamer was much higher than what it is now. So I believe like that we can translate this to what and I also want your opinion on this, guys, because maybe I'm just totally wrong, but I think that at the beginning we had like fewer games which basically had the whole or almost the whole space was just playing those. And the king example of this is World of Warcraft, because there was a time where basically like everybody was at least trying it. Like everybody wanted to play an MMORPG, like that was the one. And but at the same time, like overall, fewer people were playing games in general. While nowadays, I think there are much more gamers than there were 10 years ago, like overall. So maybe like at 10 years ago, you couldn't like have the resources to, as you say, like basically paying a developer team if you were a niche game. But maybe nowadays, a niche could be big enough to have the resources to do so. And I mean, the example that I have in my head is very stupid, but maybe effective. Like, if you want to have a very specialized shop, I don't know, you want to sell, I don't know, just boots for people who go to hard rock concerts or something like that. Like, you cannot open it in a small city because there is not enough population to, like, statistically have people who want to buy that. But if you open it in, I don't know, New York City, you could make for sure enough money because, like, the people who want that specific item, they come to you. So yeah, that's my take on the niche gaming, basically.
I would say that like with the term niche gaming, it's a spectrum, right? Like certainly like you can have very small niches and like large niches and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of like where you divide the audience. There's going to be some people that want to play your game and some people that don't. And as long as the people that do want to play your game is large enough to sustain you, I think that's what's important. To keep on going and making a great game for those sorts of people.
I agree.
But yeah, certainly I understand the fear of like watering things down and making things too, it's like it ends up becoming for no one at some point, or your core audience really doesn't like it anymore, and that's pretty unfortunate.
I mean, the most consistent like MMOs, most successful MMOs on the market, they seem to adopt this approach where they have a little bit for like a little bit of everything for for everyone, and we've seen them like have a more narrowly focused initial release, then gradually expand into like a more of an everything box, let's say.
I think it is natural in the development cycle that, you know, as we design things to experiment with new features or new things, like, you know, and then it really depends on the feedback from the users. Of course, there are two risks, right? You could just make something which is only like really for the players, like extremely engaged, extremely skillful, and extremely powerful in the product, and then the other players can't participate. So there is a little bit of the design issue. It's called rubber banding, which means like constantly trying to have content that can allow people to catch up, and the people are the most powerful and dedicated. They're always complete the content first. And at the same time, there is some experimentation like that you want to do there. I think a lot depends on the feedback from the users. I think we should definitely experiment with some additional features apart from the core ones. And when we'll release, we'll try to keep a narrow scope in terms of the initial feature set. But the experimentation and trying to find new things, the important thing is looking at the data, right? If people and the feedback and the community likes some part of the game and this is adding to the experience, you can probably leave it as part of the game. But I don't know if all the time, like, you know, it completely equates to watering down the product, right? So can you give me an example of one thing that you believe, like in one of the products you love, you really believe did that watered down the content or watered down the experience? And this is like important for us also in the learning, like since you know, there's like experience that you also want to hear from other people.
I think I experienced that mainly with WoW, I would say.
Yeah, I understand that with WoW. Like I remember running, you know, like Scholomance and having that being super hard, and then it got easier. And LFG queues definitely, I think, and daily quest or daily dungeon kind of destroyed the game as well.
I think that Cataclysm killed it for me. Like,
yeah, I understand that completely. I think it's just like Vincenzo says, you have to take on a case by case basis. In Albion Online, when you got killed, you know, your body could get looted, and then you had to. Usually, by the time you made it back to your body, there was nothing left on it. And so I thought, but I really enjoyed PvP in that game, and you know, when you get killed, you only kind of have one chance to do that fight, and you don't really have like repeat. You can't revive back, go put some equipment on at your bank, and then run back out 10 minutes later and still feel like you're in it. So they introduced battlegrounds, which I thought I was like, okay, now I can get more into the rhythm of things, and it's like a little bit less punishing because when I die, I'm not losing my stuff. You could call that a casualization, but I think like overall, people appreciated that. But you know, of course, it made death in a certain case less impactful.
I'm pretty sure like the long-time fans hated that, like 100%. The kind of people that would tell you get good.
Yeah, I understand that too, but I think there's a certain. I was a longtime fan too, and I appreciated it. So like, I think it just has to be, you know, features are going to change over time, and whether or not certain people like them or dislike them, I think it's like you just have to figure out what you think might be best for your audience.
So a little variety of content can be good, but having a clear focus is important if you want to deliver a truly quality experience.
Yeah, I think so.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we'll be moving on to the next topic. I actually I need to check which topic that was it. Yeah, the Sandbox.
Oh right, yeah.
So
Go ahead.
So like most MMOs nowadays seem to be steering clear of using the term like sandbox, and they opt for like less ambiguous terms like virtual world, And but it seems like Curloop is trying to embrace it. But the thing is, Sandbox means different things to different people, and sometimes it is shorthand for we skimped on content. I understand that the players can be the content, but they have to be given the tools to do that. So, in what way is World Eternal Online a sandbox MMORPG?
Yeah, so I think that to me, it's a few things. The leveling experience and where you want to level can be a little bit less directed. You know what I mean? And of course, there are monsters with different levels, and you don't want to attack someone who's 10 levels above you. But definitely, there's a little bit more flexibility there. Also, kind of what events are happening at any given time is much less structured, right? So there could be an event where this demon spawning over here in the northeast, and and those things just kind of pop up whenever the event schedule deems it to happen. And then there's kind of the crafting economy of things. It's like you don't need to make the equipment that we always tell you to make. There's a wide variety of things to make. There's a wide variety of any city that you want to go to and visit whichever player that wants to make you your equipment. All those things are a lot more flexible. The territory I view is also very sandboxy, where it's like, you know, guilds can take over different pieces of territory by conquering a fortress. Like I always loved like sieging stuff in Dark Age of Camelot, and kind of having that actually take place and affect the territory, I think is very like a sandboxy experience, right? Like you never know what you're going to get, you never know which guild you're going to battle. All that sort of stuff is not just on rails. So that's kind of how I view. There's just like a lot more flexibility in decisions.
Ultimately, if I can also add one thing that we didn't go to right now, but we go back to the concept of how these player cities are positioned in the world. So the land barons who owns land deeds and who owns the shops, they will position the buildings, and they have to claim an area of the world itself. So at the beginning, it's more like more virgin territory, and they have to go and claim an area on a specific region of the world map. And then after the area is claimed, then it can start to build on top. So there's also part of formation of the realm, like where people interact and play, which is created by the users. And so like physically the part we're not going to position these things, we're going to define with some areas which are going to, just for design purposes in the map, they have to be positioned in this way, but they have to be claimed and they have to be built upon. And that connects to the fortresses, and that connects to what's closer to specific dungeon entrances and whatnot. And so like that part is also an interesting dynamic that is going to contribute to the all, like how you want to decorate the world, like in that specific area, right? But it's also up to the players. I'm really excited about that part.
Yeah, like I don't know, zoom out just for a second here. Is that like I got into games because like I always felt that games should be like a unique experience for every single player, right? And in the early days when I worked on games like Soul Reaver and Tomb Raider and games like that, I felt like that wasn't the case. The story was like when people play through those games, it's largely the same experience for all those players. And that's why I think like, farther along in my career, I want to create those types of experience where it really is different for everyone. What role you're playing, like what happened in the server that day, all those types of events, and like what you did with your 2 or 3 friends, or what you did solo. I think that's all like really really important. Like I still remember in WoW when I was in the Barrens as like a level 15 Horde player, and a level 40 Paladin ran through, and we chased him through the swamp and eventually killed him. And that was like a cool experience. That was very, very unique to the few players that were around at that time, that were around me at that time. So that's the type of stuff that I think is really, really important to us in creating that more on a mass scale. But certainly, like Vincenzo said, the cities are a big part of that. Like having every city be unique and changing all the time. Shops coming in and out, like who's the top blacksmith or alchemist, or what guild is working for what city and expanding their power and influence. That's like really, really important for us.
So how will content be released?
Like what type of content?
I mean, we're all changing content, I would say.
I see. Yeah, I mean, new events will come out all the time, and it's not like we need to do a update on the client or anything like that to do that sort of stuff. So we can be pushing stuff to the server, and you guys don't even know it, and there'll be a new event coming out, and there'll be multiple events per day, and of course some of them will get reused, but then that's also another great way to kind of for people to earn those rewards again. So if this demon is the only one that drops some ingredient that you need to make a demon sword, then if you missed at that time, maybe he'll be back later. So yeah, we'll be pushing stuff to the server all the time, and you guys may or may not know it. But yeah, new stuff will be constantly happening that way.
Okay, so I'll rephrase. So like it seems like guilds will either cooperate or be at each other's throats.
Yeah.
So the type of content I'm asking about is the type of content that will force guilds to cooperate. Like as in I don't know, like a new invasion, or I don't know, like some type of event like that.
Yeah. So those events, I think. I mean, we will reuse those sorts of events, right? But I would say, we're pushing stuff on a weekly basis, if not more often. And of course, certain things will take us longer to develop, right? So it's not like we can make something in a week that's like a huge change to the game. But kind of as we finish it, if a feature takes us like a month or 2 months or whatever to develop, we'll push it right out and get people participating in it.
But I guess if I can grasp that, like, correct me if I'm wrong from the question. You said like how like some of those features will control essentially the interaction between the guilds themselves, like how that reflects. I mean, there are a couple of things we call the zone quests, the world events. Essentially, those ones in a specific area, regardless of whether you guys are rivals or not, it should be in the best interest. And this is one of the things I learned from some of the previous games. And some of them in the mobile space, and honestly, where there is a lot of politics and conversations and alliances needs to be forged. And so imagine that you really guys will have to open the gate and to enter there and kill to gain entrance to a specific dungeon. I think the decision should be for the people in that area to say, hey, should we cooperate for this and just try to bring it down as fast as possible? And then, once the gate is open, that we can be enemies then. Right. And so like leave a little bit of the decision to the players in this one, whereas more obvious things like this fortress once conquered starts to give us benefits like, the resources and everything else around it's for us. And that can be more in the dynamics of the daily things. But yeah, I think it has to be politics and just communication through the players, which is what I loved, right? You need to talk with the other alliance like masters and say, hey, you guys, like, what do you want to do here? I should just like, if I go next to the gate, you're going to attack me or not? And so that's part of the dynamic where, but yeah, some of these events will require the cooperation in this sense, and you guys decide what to do there.
Yeah, definitely. It's very reminiscent of a very recent like Web3 gaming experience we've had in a game called Mithrium. And if you're interested in learning more, you could read. We have an article in our Medium about it. You can check it out.
Yep.
Like it had a lot of drama, a lot of politics, a lot of.
Yeah, that's what is good, and like that's what makes for people like to have conversation and chat and some like yell at each other or be friends or whatnot, and everything is turbocharged by the fact that there is also a blockchain component, as you mentioned. So yeah, those are going to be very interesting dynamics once we let them play, and this is part of the emerging behavior and emerging systems for us too. Like what I wouldn't want to do is design exactly every sequence perfectly, but it just more leave some of the variables open in the world, and then you see what we describe as, again, emerging behavior. Like some systems, once the variable are set, especially with our trigger system, and a couple of things we're gonna describe more later, is that you have a range of possible outcomes, but you don't need to force everybody on that outcome. And so the human component is important because those are the variables you can't model perfectly. You can model 50% of players are more aggressive than the other ones, sure, but you don't know exactly like how things will work out. And maybe if the cooperation didn't happen, you will never open the gate. But yeah, I agree. Like, I will go and read the article. Always interested in learning more about this from other products.
Yeah, I remember at one time we had a bunch of people in one VC, and people were about to start crying. that was how bad it was. Anyway.
Okay, that's intense. Emotions are good, guys. Like emotions move things. Like apathy has never been like the driver for many things in life. But I guess if you get to the point where people are that excited, you're doing something good. It's not a bad thing.
Yeah, like so much at stake.
Yeah. I mean, that's real work that you guys put in. I could understand that completely.
Yeah. So I was wondering, how does kpin work in World Eternal Online?
Oh, PK, like player kills?
Yeah, PK, yeah.
Yeah. So this is still, I think, may go through a few changes before it gets fully released, and I'm sure we'll experiment there. But right now, if you're killed by another player, your hero goes on like a death timer, kind of similar to a MOBA, really. So it could be as short as 30 seconds or something like that. The difference here is that like you can actually, while that hero's dead, you can just switch to another hero and respawn. We may want to do something different if your guild is defending a fortress in territory. Like maybe we want to put that whole player on a death timer, or maybe we just allow them to kind of burn through their heroes, and like each one dies and they're on 60-second death timers, and you can keep on participating as long as you have a hero that's available.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's something that we can change around quite a bit. Right now, when you die in PvE, you can kind of just respawn back at like a teleporter, which are kind of spread out around the map, and then you may need to kind of run back to where you were. But yeah, those things I think will be easy for us to change.
Like, could we even see like a more sophisticated system where, if, for example, you were murdered by someone in your own faction or in your own guild, you would then could I don't know, ask for a trial and something like that, and have that person serve jail time, something like this, like that. This also sounds like, I don't know, like it's a
I
dream
think
of mine, let's say.
I think it's cool to have like guild politics like that, but yeah, I think there are certain things where you do need to enforce some sort of hard and fast rules, right? Like you can't have everyone killing everyone, and then then there's just certain interface stuff that makes it really, really hard. Like when you click on a player, are you trying to follow them, or are you just trying to kill them, right? So there's a certain simplicity to the UX and the user interface there, but yeah, I do love the whole like, this guy screwed me over and he's in our guild, and should we kick him out? I love that sort of stuff personally.
I guess. Okay. So I guess, yeah, go ahead, please.
I saw that there is a very interesting question in the chat by Igor. And maybe can I read it to you guys? So he is asking, most Web3 gaming projects are doing pre-launch distribution / selling of very important in-game resources, and then having problems delivering healthy gameplay because of this decision. Could you tell us about your approach to the initial distribution of in-game resources like heroes, licenses, crafting materials, items, etc.?
So we're not going to distribute any of that stuff until you can use it inside the alpha or beta or whatever that we have launched. I think we come from a long history of working on mobile and console games, and we're very aware of like what it takes to keep an economy balanced and working. So that sort of stuff is really, really important to us. And even if it means that like we distribute a few, blacksmith licenses at a time and kind of test how that goes. Even the beta itself, I'm sure we'll go through several revisions, and I'm sure we'll have like server resets and stuff like that. So I think it's really important that we get that sort of stuff right. And not just sell stuff for the sake of making money. Like I think we mentioned earlier, the project's already funded. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
that kind of frees us up to make a lot of these sorts of decisions.
Yeah, exactly. Like, guys, we don't have to rush those things specifically because we went and raised VC money, which is already a pretty hard thing to do because those guys see thousands and thousands of pitches every day. So we went through the pain of trying to refine things at the beginning, where the rationale and the experience and some of the modeling we did at the beginning was at least sound enough for those people to accept it. And that's the way we wanted to do it. Like I wouldn't think about doing a project today trying to go out and ask. I mean, no judgment here. Everybody should do the approach and find the road and trying to do the relationship with their community the way they want. But I feel better because we're risking personally with Dan and myself, like since the beginning when it was just the two of us, and all the way now, like where we are around 30 people and something. But and really, like we wanted to get the funds, like, and just make sure that we will start to open all these things like resources and weapons and leaders only when they're working, and that involves like a little bit more testing during the alpha. That's a fundamental different principle here. If you I understand some other developers as well, if they have the need for funding at the beginning, they may make decisions where they are selling too much in the economy for this balance, and sometimes it's not maliciously so. But they had to do that, and then some of those decisions are hard to correct. And so, yeah, this is part of the advantage here in building this with like the private money and everything else, and then opening the sales to the others. I don't know what your opinion is around this, guys, but I think for us this was a pretty strong decision since the beginning.
I think it's very healthy because basically, as you said, it gives you more creative freedom, basically. Like, you don't have to do specific stuff because you need to do it in order to basically crowdfund your project. But you already you already took the risk to go and basically you took the risk on yourself and found the VC funding. So on that part, you're set, and now you can take the decisions that you think are the healthiest for the long term of your game. So I think it's just very healthy and makes the game like inherently more sustainable.
Of course, but make no mistake, we are definitely always under pressure and everything else. We're trying to be as efficient as possible. But yeah, I think you nailed it in the sense that it allows us to make a little bit more. You see, like we could have probably done it already, and even if we're very careful, like in many ways, like we are a US based company and whatnot, but. Yeah, this is why we didn't open like some of the sales already. Just we want to make sure everything works perfectly, like at least internally first. And then I'm sure when we release on alpha, there's going to be some problems and bugs that happens all the time. But at the point we, at least we saw everything working in game, and that's the best proposal that we can do for the community essentially. And I hope people will appreciate that.
By the way, you haven't released any information regarding the chain you're going to use. Is that still a secret?
We're doing a lot of the technical due diligence there, and we have tested internally in different platforms, right? So we've been trying these things functionally internally. We just and then I'll let you add anything to this, but we have done a lot of the technical due diligence. We have some working contracts and all these kind of things internally. And just like we're not ready to just make 100% commitment to one another. But yeah, we had it work internally. So
Yeah, not much to add there. It's just that, like Vincenzo said, it's something that Vincenzo's been taking a lot of time researching it, and we just really want to be sure before we commit, because not all the chains are equal, and there's some good choices out there, but then there's also downsides to every choice or when you commit to something. So I think it's important that we just find the right one.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I know that's probably like that's the big question. Like, yeah, bear with us, guys. Give us a little bit more time. But yeah, we will announce it at some point. It's just like, and even recently, you have to be extra careful. There's been a lot of things going on in the world, so we're really reviewing everything before we announce it.
Sure. And actually, like having heard you talk through like the last hour, basically, it's really in line with what you said before, that you are going for gameplay first. So you're now focusing on delivering the gameplay that you want, and like the power of blockchain and Web3 to like improve some aspects of the gameplay. But yeah, it's how can I say it? It's maybe natural that it comes after the gameplay, and you're of course it's very nice to hear that you're very careful in choosing the right instrument for what you want to achieve.
Thank you.
So, like, moving on. Will there be a place for character customization? Because, I mean, how can a person feel like they're role playing if they have to constantly switch characters? I mean, the character should be their avatar, a medium for the player to express themselves.
In that way, this MMO is a little bit different, right? Like in this way, it's more like kind of playing a large MOBA. I think for us, the gameplay of having kind of these narrowly defined characters which have like 4 or 5 skills each made the boss battles very, very interesting. And it is a little bit different than other MMOs. And I totally understand that. I think at some point down the line we could do more character customization there, but on like a per character basis. But that's probably not going to be in the initial launch. I think in terms of like the cities and the buildings and stuff like that, there'll probably be a little bit more expression where you can, if you're a blacksmith or you have your guild hall sitting in the world, you can select from different variations there. And you can also select your guild banner and have some sort of design there as well, and having that fly over your building. So certain things like that, and the cities also will be very, very, customized per se, right? Where people are placing the buildings where they want to place them. I suppose that the landowner can kind of move everything around to make the city look very pleasing for them. But yeah, I would say that the characters in that way are they're more gameplay focused in that way.
Yeah, like,
and also
talking to Pelagina, we had this this funny idea of the game being a like massive MOBA, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just like one of the things we were discussing with Dan is just, I mean, if you're in a MOBA in a session specifically, you're really paying so much attention to not being killed and not trying to scrap the game, because like you are locked for 30 minutes. It's very hard to recover from some of the initial decisions. One of those things, like having that ability to change and adapt, and the world is still persistent after you leave, I think it opens a little bit of the fun gameplay from there. But at the same time, without a little less of the stress, a little bit more of the cooperation without some of the necessary, like, oh, I have to pay attention like for 30 minutes straight just to not be killed here, and opens a couple of other things in there. But another thing on the customization, guys, like, there is a lot of things also, I will say, from the art side, and also with the camera, like the camera most of the time is just like from this top down. And so there's also a couple of considerations on really carefully designing some of the shapes of the characters and whatnot so that they read very well. So there's always so many permutations that eventually you can do so that the shapes are interesting, the forms are interesting, the colors are well balanced, and everything else. But yeah, so the customizations are is something that could come in the future. Just like it's complicated to, and even at the beginning, as you really said correctly at the start, like we are trying to focus the energy on things that are deliverable, like and we can do well. And I think like the set of characters with the skills done correctly, like 4 or 5 of them for each, it's probably the best choice to start.
But certainly there are a lot of functional ways to customize your character in terms of what talent tree and what talents do you select. Even your characters have like kind of some innate traits that as you fuse them together, those traits kind of you can get new ones added there. So even that side of things, there's some functional things that will be very, very different, even if the characters look the same. And then I think maybe down the line we can look at something like the Dota character customization system where you can kind of replace pieces on the character and their costumes look a little bit different, right? So they have like a different helmet or different staff or different clothing, that sort of stuff. But that'll be, I think, very tough for us to do because it's very content heavy to do that right from the outset.
And if I can add, Dan, I don't know, like technically speaking, there is also another thing, and maybe it's not 100% visible from that. Like when you're looking at the world from the top like this, there is a lot of characters that are going to go around, and so the tests are like. Let me ask you. Like now, I'm just curious. Like I guess I don't want to say it in advance, but understand what is the expectations from people there. How many people do you think are going to be in one area, based on what you see in the video, or just like general idea? What do you think it is?
With area, you mean like one screen?
Let's say one screen is multiple screens, like pretty much what you saw, like with the camera panning around. That's what we call an area, and it's like how big it is then?
It's like 2,000 by 2,000 meters.
Yeah, so it's 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I would expect at least 20 people. I would say. I don't know. I mean, like if we were in a city, maybe.
I was going for 200, so I don't know.
I think Vincenzo means like across the entire world. So for one area or zone for us, right now it's 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. So not talking like screen space, not talking like one screen, but the entire. This we call it like the grass area right now. I think there's we have another name for it, but like a snow area might be like 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer, that sort of stuff. So in the 2K by 2K world right now.
Well, yeah, like hundreds of people, I would say.
Yeah, right. It's hundreds and above, right? So there is also a lot of things technically to try to make them, like when the camera is from the top, you can't clip things like too far away, and you can scroll really quickly, you see all the other entities zooming in and out, the monsters and everything. So there is a couple of additional things that I'm trying to hold all of them together. If you think like a typical Fortnite map, yes, there's a little bit more customization in there, but there's 100 and there's a limit. That's why technically some of the customization boils down to 100 people, even if you're in very powerful engines, right? So like if we take the decisions that we wanted hundreds, spilling, like we're just going to test even more, like spilling into the thousands. And we did some tests on that in that sense before, but we don't want to promise that for alpha for sure. But yeah, so that's also a trade-off. Like you want to have an area which is quickly scrollable and visible, theming with people and with monsters and all these other things. So with this camera, it is a really interesting challenge. And maybe another point we can just go into the technicalities of some of the development. But yeah, this has been an interesting thing to achieve from that perspective, because you can scroll and see the other people in there, and if there are 200, 300, 400 people in the map simultaneously, that starts to be really an interesting things for any engine.
Hey guys, I would just also add to that, like I do have to go in 5 minutes or so. So maybe one more question.
One more question.
or whatever you guys can do in that time.
Johan, I know which one we should ask. We should ask the RPG feeling in a role play game. You know the one?
feeling in a roleplay game.
Wait.
Which one do you mean?
I find it. Give me 1 sec.
I think we should ask about the possibility of a DAO and
Okay.
maybe balance in solo content versus multiplayer content.
Okay. I agree. It's more serious. It's more serious.
So yeah, are we gonna ever see the emergence of a World Eternal Online DAO? And I mean, how can players have an impact on the course of the game from the outside?
So we have been looking internally at the how that can be structured and what kind of voting. And I think from the design perspective, there are a few things that we have to be careful with some of the decisions that can be made. If you go too granular or too much into the design itself choices, you could have a risk of how do you really balance things for everybody? And so we have to experiment with what can be voted or not voted, regardless of whether you have a DAO or not, right? Because you get the customer feedback constantly, and you get people and players that send you feedback. So there is already some level of control there. But you can make it completely transparent with a decision and a vote. So we're not entirely sure if it is going to be something which is specifically for World Eternal or something a little bit bigger in terms of context for products and games and MMOs. But we'll be looking at internally of what that structure means and how can we bring it up. So I can't give you a date or say for sure 100%, but we're working to see if we can make it happen. And it's part of the philosophy since the beginning about how can we distribute control to the players that are engaged the most, though, with the game. So it can't be only just an asset thing. It has to be the right formula is where there is a participation between, hey, I'm really active, I know the game inside out, and all these other things in there. And then there is also another part of control based maybe on assets control or things that really give you some voting power. The idea is there, and we love it. It's just we didn't find the perfect formula, and we can't say if we're going to do it for sure. But we are studying this internally.
Thank you. So, moving on to the solo versus multiplayer content. So, one of the best things about being in this space for so long is that you get to see all of these MMOs come and go, and you get to witness all of the good ideas cross-pollinate and kind of get shared between the different games. And nowadays, MMOs have become something of a service that players are effectively consumers for. And one thing that's always been in a balance with MMOs is the difference between content for solo players and group players. And another interesting topic, which Dan brought up a while ago, is punishing content. So the question is, how do you draw the line between making content for just the individual solo player and still keeping it in the feel of an MMO? And what is your take on punishing content? Basically, the things that make you spend more time playing the game, like things like running back to your body, things like repairing your gear. I mean, the legacy features and the old school feel of MMOs.
Yeah, so I guess on solo content, just on that topic, I think when you sprinkle monsters around in the world, and for us, it's very easy for other people to go up and to kind of roll up and help you out and kill those monsters. And I think our philosophy is we don't have any problem with that, as long as we have a really good formula based on how we split the loot between players that are cooperating in a kill. I think that's what is really important. And then obviously other monsters may require more players, right? So if you place bosses in a world, then I think you need to think about what happens if players take too long. Does the boss enrage? What if a level 1 guy starts to participate in a battle with a bunch of level 50 guys, and does he get any portion of the loot? And so there's there's a lot of ideas on how to balance that properly. In terms of like, yes, you could have the boss do a few gear check attacks and make sure that they at least have enough health, and then divide the loot up like in a very fair way. I think dungeons are another way to make things more exclusive and do like more punishing content, like you said. So dungeons can only allow in a certain number of players, and then those players really have to do some very, very challenging stuff, and you're guaranteed that they can't get any help from like the rest of the players in the world, right? Because they've only decided there's a limit to how many people they can bring in. Certain other like punishing features that I think you mentioned, to me, there's certain things that I think are just, I don't know if I consider repair to be punishing, but there is item or gear repair right now, and I just feel that that's a necessary part of the economy, right? Like you need that economy sync because people are kind of earning resources by killing monsters, and they use the tools of gear to do that. There has to be some cost there that's kind of ongoing. So for me, I think balancing a proper economy with proper sinks and rewards, that's a big part of it.
But aren't really isn't the solo player left out of the picture and like in this type of setup?
So there's plenty of solo content for them to do, right? And like we'll have monsters that are that range from 1 player to 50 players, or whatever we kind of determine the upper bound to be. But there's plenty of solo content, and there can be also plenty of solo events for them to do. But I think part of encouraging players to play with other people to have greater rewards, that's gotta be, you have to incentivize that some way, right? And to me, that comes down to the reward side of things. It's like, if I am working with other people, I do maybe get different materials that allow me to make better weapons or different weapons that are good in cooperative play.
I see. I mean, a game that doesn't have retention mechanisms is in a way good, since it doesn't make the game feel like a job or a chore. And I think a lot of people appreciate that.
Yeah, I mean, if you love the game and you want to come back, and there's certain things that's time based, right? Like things take time to respawn, or maybe your pets take like an hour to collect resources, or whatever that is, or 5 minutes. There's always going to be some things that are time based. You could call those retention mechanics, or you could just call them like just part of the game. But even the fact that like a new boss spawns on the next day, you could call that a retention mechanic, but at least it's very, very interesting, and it's going to be a fun fight. And how you prepare for that fight, like what heroes you bring, what gear you wear, what potions you want to drink beforehand, what your party composition looks like. I find that makes these things more interesting, and but a data scientist may call that a retention mechanic, but to me it's like at least the fight is fun, and like it's strategic, right?
Yeah, definitely, I agree. So yeah, I guess we could wrap up, since we don't we're running out of time.
Yeah, we almost did the 2 hours like you guys requested.
Almost.
So it was really fun, for sure.
Okay, then, thanks for everybody. Thanks to everybody for being here, and I would like to thank the Curloop team for being here with us today. It was very, very interesting, and we would love to have you here with us again, like in the near future. We enjoyed this conversation very much.
Yeah, we had a great time. We'd love to be back, for sure.
Likewise, guys. Thank you so much for hosting us. That's very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.